Go ahead.
You ready for me?
Yes.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. I'm very excited about the turnout. This is a really big crowd for a very, very controversial issue. So I want to start by saying I was really super hesitant to accept the invitation to participate in this debate. I mean, to have a feminist and a pro-life Christian argument in this debate, you're definitely going to see some disagreements and fireworks, but at the end of the day, I think this is a very important issue for us all to think about. Before we get started, though, I want to be very clear, just for those of you who might not be aware of the distinction, that to call oneself pro-choice does not mean that one is for abortion. To be pro-choice is not to be pro-abortion. So while Alan believes in the pro-life position, this does not imply that I am pro-death. I assure you. This is not my position. While I am a feminist, I do not believe in Pat Robertson's quotation that feminists want to leave their husbands, kill their children, and practice witchcraft. That is not necessarily my position, at least not today. Okay? So again, being pro-choice does not mean that you are for abortion. Okay. I think the one area that Alan and I can agree upon in this debate is that we both want to see less abortions. And we have a very different opinion about how to go about that, but the fundamental idea is the same, that both of us are committed to seeing fewer and fewer abortions. The issue would be that our mission today must examine the ways in which each perspective works to achieve this goal of seeing fewer abortions, and which platform offers the most consistency, because at the end of the day, in order to take an argument seriously, we must examine the values against the backdrop of consistency. And for me, this is the key issue. At the heart of this debate are conflicting values. When we take these values independently in isolation of one another, they are both important values. But when we contextualize them in the sense of placing the values of the right to life for a fetus next to the values of protecting a woman's choice, these values will ultimately be in conflict with one another. Until we can grow babies, I suppose, in test tubes, women's bodies will continue to be the battleground for this discussion. So first of all, to be pro-choice believes that the fetus and the woman are one person, and that one person is the woman. That's the sort of fundamental claim of being pro-choice. Pro-choicers do not consider abortion to be murder in the sense that one person is murdering another person, but rather the termination of a pregnancy where a woman is carrying a potential child with potential rights. Abortion undoubtedly ends life. I am not here to argue that today. Of course, a fetus is a human being. Of course, a fetus is living and growing inside of a womb. That is not my argument. But the life is not independent of a woman's body, and in most cases of abortion cannot survive without her. Over 60% of abortions take place when the fetus is less than 9 weeks old. Secondly, pro-choicers believe that the state should protect the rights of the woman to be able to make decisions that affect their bodies. The first issue I want to address is the law. If both sides can agree that we want to see fewer abortions, we cannot look to the law to make this a reality. Studies show that whether or not abortions are legal, women will still have them as they always have. The only difference is that women who have more money will be able to access safer procedures by medically trained doctors, where poor women will not have access to those same procedures. To speak honestly about this issue requires that we acknowledge its complexity. The purpose of today is to critically think about this issue. It's easy to say that one is for life, but to confront the realities of these stories is very different. I want you to picture yourself in Mary's situation. Mary was told at 21 weeks of pregnancy, this is after viability, told at 21 weeks that her fetus had an advanced textbook case of hydrocephalus, which is an excess of fluid surrounding the brain. It was so acute and so advanced that it was untreatable. As a practicing Catholic, her and her husband sought a medical miracle and were told that there was no surgery or no therapy that could save their baby. Her own health was at risk by continuing the pregnancy. So I would ask you today, should she continue this pregnancy? Is it ethically wrong to deny her the treatment to abort a fetus that will ultimately die? Corinne Costello was 7 months pregnant with her third child. She and her husband Jim found out that a lethal neuromuscular disease had left their much-wanted daughter unable to survive. Her body had stiffened and was frozen, wedged into a transverse position. In addition, amniotic fluid had puddled up and built up to dangerous levels in Corinne's uterus. Devout Christians they were opposed to abortion. The Costellos agonized over 2 weeks about this decision. Should Corinne continue her pregnancy? Maureen Vertel and her husband Andrew, practicing Catholics, were expecting their second child at 6 months. She was pregnant for 6 months. A sonogram revealed that no brain was developing, only a brain stem. Experts at the New England Medical Center in Boston confirmed that the fetus would not survive. Should Claudia wait for the fetus to die of natural causes? Hope for a miracle, or at least the possibility that the fetus will not endanger her life? These are all very complicated questions, and I'm not asking you to answer these questions, but I'm asking you to consider the task of being able to make those decisions for somebody else, for a woman going through these really difficult situations. And if you aren't capable of making those decisions for her, how comfortable are you with telling her that the state is going to decide, that the state is going to make that decision for her? all of the procedures all of the abortions that ended up happening in the true scenarios that I read you before happened with a very controversial and often used by pro-life activists procedure of extraction and dilation. It's more familiar when we call it partial birth abortion, because there was a partial birth abortion ban in 2003 by George W. Bush. This ban would have prohibited those doctors from performing those badly needed abortions for the stories that I mentioned earlier. Further, this is a true story also. A student told me an anonymous story this semester of a 9-year-old girl being raped by her uncle and becoming pregnant. How many of you remember what it was like to be 9 years old, what you were doing when you were 9, who your friends were, where you were playing? Can you imagine being faced with the situation of being raped and becoming impregnated by your own uncle? What would you do? What can you do? And can we make those decisions for other people? While I'm aware that most unplanned pregnancies in this country are not the product of rape or incest, this still does not justify categorical prohibitions, because the truth of women's experiences are such that many women are involved in these really complex, complicated scenarios. The decision to have a child is intensely personal. Regardless of how you feel about this issue religiously, the choice to become pregnant and carry a fetus to term is one of the most personal and life-changing decisions one can make. When I got pregnant, I had a million questions. Hey, can I afford this baby? How am I going to take care of this baby? Do I have enough money to pay for the $400 a month prenatal visits, the $10,000 childbirth? What am I going to do when my partner is deployed to Afghanistan? How am I going to raise this baby alone with a full-time job? Am I going to lose my job? Which I did. A story for a different day. But all of these questions came into play, and I am in a loving, committed relationship with someone that I wanted to have a child with. So to imagine having to make this decision outside of that context is really unimaginable for me. I want you to consider today, too, that 24,000 children will die from easily treatable diseases, things like starvation, things like lack of access to clean water, health care, dehydration, and we should ask if pro-lifers are calling for increased foreign aid to protect children. Further, does being pro-life require being anti-war or being against the killing of animals for food or clothing? What about when someone threatens your life and you kill in self-defense? These are outright examples of killing, but what about the more subtle examples of killing, like the sanctions that we place in other countries that ultimately leave hundreds of thousands of people starving to death? So instead of asking the question, is it wrong to kill, the better question might be, when is it wrong to kill? When we address the larger issue of supporting what we call life, and there are things that pro-lifers can easily deal with and are doing nothing about, we have to start questioning those values.